I took the overnight checkpoint job because after the shooting, I no longer trusted myself anywhere. A decision had to be made fast. The department called it justified. The family called it murder. I called it what it was. The end of the life I had before. One bad stop near dawn. One tired decision made half a second too early. And a teenage passenger never made it home. By the time I found work again, it was in West Texas, on a lonely inland checkpoint where the night shift paid extra, and nobody seemed interested in my past as long as I could wear a vest, follow procedure, and stay awake until sunrise. The first thing I saw was the floodlights, then the lanes under the canopy, then the barriers, the cameras, and the office trailer sitting off to one side with dust blowing through the white glare. Beyond all that was open dark and scrub country, stretching so far it made the checkpoint feel less like a workplace than an outpost. I remember thinking it was a good place for a man trying not to make another mistake. I had no idea it was built around unfinished stops. The checkpoint sat across the highway like a small piece of federal order dropped into open desert and left there to harden. Concrete barriers split the lanes under the canopy. Floodlights burned white over the inspection area and made everything outside their reach look even blacker. Cameras were mounted high on steel poles. A secondary bay sat off to the right, beside a chain-link fence and a prefab office trailer with narrow windows glowing yellow from inside. Beyond that was scrub, gravel, and the long, dark stretch of West Texas that makes every human structure feel temporary, no matter how much concrete it uses. A flag snapped above the trailer in the dry wind. Even with engines moving through the lane, the place felt strangely isolated, like the road had been cut out of the land rather than built across it. I parked beside two government pickups and sat for a second with both hands on the wheel before going in. Inside the trailer, the air smelled like old coffee, copier toner, dust, and the kind of stale, conditioned air government spaces always seem to trap. The break room was small and bright, with a humming vending machine, a bulletin board full of procedural notices, and a sink nobody fully trusted. Through one interior window, I could see the camera desk with 3 monitors, a keyboard, and a row of labeled log binders. The night supervisor was an older man named Garza, heavy in the shoulders, shaved head, the kind of face that looked patient until it did not. He read my name off the folder in his hand, looked at me once, and asked if I had worked traffic before. I said yes. He said this was easier than traffic and harder than people thought. Then he handed me a reflective vest, a radio, and a clipboard with the route for overnight checks. His tone stayed calm and practical, but I had the clear feeling he was measuring how I reacted to things he had not said yet. Garza walked me through the site in the way experienced men do when they want to teach the shape of a place before they explain its problems. Primary lane first, then secondary inspection, then the office side with the monitors and printed logs. He pointed out the thermal station, the plate reader feed, the barrier controls, the camera playback system, and the manual logbook used when the software dropped entries or glitched out in the middle of a shift. He said the checkpoint was quiet most nights. Families heading north, ranch trucks, service vans, the occasional bus, plenty of semis. Nothing in his voice suggested drama. That was part of what made the place feel wrong to me from the start. Men only get that measured when they have already learned not to waste emotion on something recurring. At the far end of the canopy, Lane 3 sat a little apart from the others. Same barriers, same camera pole, same floodlight wash, but it seemed to hold the dark differently, like the black road beyond it reached closer. He handed me the unofficial rule sheet in the camera room, sliding it across the desk between the keyboard and the monitor stand as if it were just another site memo. No header, no agency seal, no date. 5 lines in plain type, all of them short enough to feel practiced. If a vehicle appears on lane 3 camera before you hear it approach, do not step into the lane until the headlights fully stop. If the driver keeps both hands on the wheel and will not look at you, ask one question only. If they answer with your name, send them to secondary and do not repeat yourself. If a vehicle clears the lane but shows no exit timestamp on the monitor, mark it by hand and keep the lane closed for 3 minutes. If thermal shows no heat in the rear compartment, wait 40 seconds before opening the back door. If you hear knocking before the count is done, do not open it. I read the page twice. Then I looked up at Garza and asked who wrote it. He said enough people had. I asked whether the rules were about smugglers, equipment glitches, or some local night shift superstition that had hardened into routine. Garza gave me a look that was not amused and not offended, just tired in a way that told me he had heard every version of the question before. He said the checkpoint ran better when the rules were followed. I asked whether there was an official explanation. He said official explanations had a way of arriving late and leaving early. Then he took the sheet back from me, added one handwritten line at the bottom in dark block letters, and slid it across again. If the same vehicle is logged twice within 1 hour, do not stop it a second time. Lower the barrier and let it pass. That was the first rule that got under my skin. The others sounded like risk management with a strange edge to them. That one sounded like surrender. I asked him why any officer or agent would wave through a repeated vehicle at a checkpoint. He rested one hand on the desk and said, because some stops get worse when you finish them. The first hour passed almost normally, which made the abnormal parts more effective when they arrived. A pickup with fencing supplies in the bed, a tired couple in an SUV with fast food bags and a sleeping toddler, a semi-driver from El Paso who looked more annoyed than awake. I checked IDs when asked, watched vehicle flow, and learned the rhythm of engines coming under the canopy, slowing in the floodlight glare, then rolling forward again into the dark northbound road. The camera room stayed warm and a little stale behind me. The radio crackled now and then, with clipped codes and lane notes. I started to settle into the familiar comfort of procedure. Ask clearly. Look carefully. Keep your hands visible. Do not improvise. For the first time in months, I felt the shape of work fitting around me in a way that did not require memory or defense. Then one of the monitors showed headlights entering lane 3, while the road outside the window beyond the trailer was still empty. I noticed it because the movement on the screen came a second too early. 2 low headlights rolling toward the stop line on the lane 3 camera feed, bright in the dust, steady and slow. I turned at once toward the actual lane and saw nothing but floodlight glare on empty pavement. Then, maybe 2 seconds later, the real vehicle came into view from the dark. Same pair of headlights, same speed, same angle. My first thought was lag in the feed. My second was that the rule sheet had anticipated that exact moment. Do not step into the lane until the headlights fully stop. so I stayed back from the barrier and watched the sedan roll under the canopy. Beige four-door. Road dust up the sides, no obvious damage. One driver, no visible passengers. The headlights stopped. Only then did I walk forward. The driver already had both hands on the wheel. That detail hit me before I reached the window, because the posture looked less like caution than rehearsal. The driver was a man in his 50s maybe older, with a lined face, close-cut gray hair, and eyes fixed straight ahead, as if the windshield itself had his full attention. I asked citizenship. He answered, "Yes, sir," in a calm, flat voice, and did not look at me. I asked where he was coming from. "Las Cruces," he said. Same tone, same fixed stare. The question felt ordinary. The moment did not. There was no smell of alcohol, no visible contraband, nothing dramatic in the car. Still, I found myself studying the way his hands sat on the wheel at 10 and 2, 2 exact, 2 still. I checked the rear seat. Empty. Front floorboards clean. No luggage I could see. When I handed the documents back, his fingers stayed on the wheel until I withdrew my hand completely. Then he took them, nodded once without turning his head, and rolled forward into the dark. It should have ended there. Instead, I watched the monitor a few seconds later and saw Lane 3 hold his vehicle in frame long after the road outside was empty. I went back into the camera room and leaned closer to the monitor, thinking the feed had frozen. The sedan still sat there on screen in Lane 3 under the floodlights, exactly where it had been 3 seconds earlier. Engine idling, driver shape visible behind the glass. Outside the trailer window, the real lane was empty. No taillights, no vehicle sound, just dust moving low over the pavement. I checked the timestamp in the corner of the feed. It was live. I looked down at the lane log. Entry time had posted. Exit time had not. The third rule came back into my head word for word. If a vehicle clears the lane but does not show an exit timestamp on the monitor, mark it by hand and keep the lane closed for 3 minutes. So I wrote the plate number, time, and lane in the manual log, then hit the control that lowered the barrier for Lane 3. Garza looked over from the other desk, saw what I had done, and said nothing. We both watched the live feed together until, at the exact end of 3 minutes, the sedan on screen rolled forward and disappeared into darkness it had already passed through once. After that first Lane 3 delay, the rest of the shift kept moving, but nothing felt settled again. Regular traffic still came through, a landscaping trailer, 2 oil field trucks, a family van with half the kids asleep against the windows. I checked documents, watched hands, glanced in back seats, and tried to make my own breathing sound normal in my ears. That was the part I had forgotten about jobs built around procedure. Once something goes wrong inside the system, every ordinary repetition after that starts feeling staged, as if normal life is being used to hide the seam. Around 1 a.m, I checked the manual log again. The delayed sedan entry sat there in my handwriting, neat and undeniable. Garza saw me looking at it and said the first useful thing he had said since handing me the rule sheet. He said timing events were usually better on your first night than on your third. I asked what that meant. He said it meant the checkpoint noticed when someone new was learning its habits. I wanted to push him harder after that, but a bus came through with 30 passengers and a tired driver who kept calling everybody boss. And for the next 20 minutes, the work stayed busy enough to force my mind back into its lane. That helped. Buses are good for that. They give you too many visible details to drift into the wrong thoughts. Faces in windows, overhead bags, half-awake conversations, paperwork moving from one hand to another. By the time the bus cleared, the checkpoint had gone quiet again, in the way desert places do. All at once and without transition. Engines gone. Wind back. Floodlights humming over empty pavement. I stepped into the camera room and checked lane. 3 out of habit. Empty on screen. Empty outside. Garza was filling out something at the far desk in slow block print. I asked how many people worked this shift. He said enough to cover the lanes and not enough to feel crowded. Then he added that the weird traffic tended to prefer thin staffing. He said it like a practical note, not a warning. At 1:24 a.m., a white cargo van came through lane 2. Clean body, no company branding. 1 driver, 1 passenger, both men in ball caps and work jackets. The stop itself was ordinary. They answered clearly, looked where they were supposed to look, gave short, clean answers, and rolled through. But when I stepped back into the camera room, lane 3 was showing another arrival before I heard the engine. Low headlights first, then the shape of a dark SUV moving toward the stop line on the monitor. I turned toward the window. Empty road. 2 seconds later, the real vehicle appeared from the dark, exactly where the feed had already placed it. Same pattern as before. This time I was ready for the feeling of it, but being ready did not make it better. It only made it more real. I stayed back from the barrier until the headlights fully stopped. The SUV idled under the canopy with the soft, uneven sound of an older engine. Driver only from what I could see. Rear glass tinted too dark to read much from the lane. The driver was a woman in her 40s maybe, dark hair pulled back, both hands high on the steering wheel, eyes straight ahead. The posture hit me before the face did, the same exactness I had seen in the sedan, too careful to be casual and too calm to be fear. I asked citizenship. She answered yes, in a low, flat voice, without looking at me. Then I remembered the second rule. If the driver keeps both hands on the wheel and will not look at you, ask one question only. That stopped me cold in the middle of the routine. Most stops are built on follow-up, clarify, compare, confirm. Here the rule was telling me that another question would matter more than the first, so I kept it simple and asked where she was headed. The answer came back at once, clear and unhurried. Ray Daugherty. My name landed in the lane between us, like something set down gently on concrete. I did not move for a second. Then I stepped back and told her to pull to secondary. She obeyed at once. No hesitation, no irritation, no confusion, just a slow turn of the wheel and a steady roll toward the secondary bay. I stood where I was long enough to feel my pulse hid in my throat, then called it over the radio and headed that way myself. The bay sat off to the right under a smaller set of lights, chain link fence behind it, inspection table against the wall, camera mounted high in the corner. By the time I got there, the bay was empty. No SUV, no driver, no sound of an engine pulling off. I checked the far gate first. Closed. Then the access road beyond the fence. Empty. Garza came over at a fast walk without running and asked what I had said to her. I told him exactly. One question, one answer. Send to secondary. He looked up at the bay camera, then at the empty pavement, and said that was correct. I asked where the vehicle had gone. He said the better question was whether the system would log it as still active. Back in the camera room, the answer was waiting. Lane 3 showed entry time for the SUV. Secondary routing had posted. No secondary arrival timestamp. No exit. Just an open encounter hanging in the software like a door somebody had forgotten to close. Garza told me to mark it by hand and leave secondary alone for 10 minutes. I asked why 10 now instead of 3. He said because once a vehicle is routed off the primary lane, the checkpoint starts treating absence differently. I wrote the note into the manual log with careful block letters, so my hand would not show what the rest of me was doing. Then I checked the playback. On the monitor, the SUV rolled into lane 3 exactly as I remembered it. The woman kept her eyes forward, exactly as I remembered that too. But when the frame caught her face in profile, the features were blown pale by the floodlight in a way that erased the details. Not blur, not glare exactly, just too much white where a face should have been. The plate was readable, the body lines were clear. Only the face refused to hold. I spent the next hour trying to force the checkpoint back into something procedural and dependable. A box truck with produce, a rancher hauling feed, 2 college kids in a sedan who looked scared until they realized nobody was interested in them beyond the usual questions. Their normal fear actually helped me. It reminded me that most tension at a stop still belonged to the living world, but every time I stepped back into the trailer, I checked the monitor wall before anything else. The open secondary event for the SUV stayed active on the screen longer than it should have. Then, without any visible change in the bay camera feed, it cleared itself. No arrival, no departure, no administrative note. Just gone. Garza saw me notice and said not to chase cleared anomalies in the software. I asked whether there was any record kept outside the handwritten log. He said there used to be more paperwork. Then he said too much paperwork encouraged the wrong kind of attention. That was the first moment I understood the unofficial rules were not just night shift folklore. They were a survival system built in the gaps left by official reporting. Around 2:10 a.m., traffic dropped off so completely that the checkpoint began sounding bigger than it looked, wind striking the canopy supports, the low electrical hum from the floodlights, a distant clank from somewhere near the secondary fence line. I was at the coffee machine, pouring something dark and undrinkable into a paper cup when one of the lane radios crackled and gave a clipped burst of static. Then a voice I had not heard before said, "Secondary clear." The radio fell silent again. No unit number, no name, no follow-up. Garza crossed the room fast enough to matter, picked up the handset, and asked for repeat. Nothing came back. He set the radio down carefully and told me that if a lane or bay cleared itself without a timestamp, we did not go looking for the missing step. I asked whether that happened often. He said often enough to write rules about. Then he looked through the trailer window toward the dark highway and went still, in that way experienced men do when they recognize a pattern before speaking it aloud. Lane 3, camera, had just lit up with another arrival. This one appeared on screen almost 4 seconds before the road outside showed headlights, long enough that even if I had wanted to call it lag, I could not have done it honestly. It was the same beige sedan from earlier, same body shape, same road dust, same fixed pace coming under the canopy. I did not need the plate to know it, but I checked the plate anyway and felt something cold settle into place when the numbers matched my handwritten log exactly. The first rule did not cover this. The fifth one did. If the same vehicle is logged twice within 1 hour, do not stop it a second time. Lower the barrier and let it pass. Every instinct I had from road work pushed the other way. Repeated vehicle, same lane, same night, strange behavior. That is exactly the kind of pattern you stop harder, not less. But procedure had already failed me once in life because I trusted my own tension more than the framework in front of me. So I put my hand on the barrier control and waited until the sedan reached the line. The driver was the same man as before, gray hair, lined face, hands placed carefully on the wheel. This time he turned his head just enough for me to see his eyes. They were on me before I had spoken a word. I lowered the barrier without asking anything and stepped back from the lane. The sedan rolled forward at a slow, steady pace, passing close enough that I could see the driver clearly in the side window. He did not smile. He did not nod. He only watched me with a look I knew too well from my old life. The expression people wear when they think you have finally understood what the stop is really about. Then he was through and moving north into the dark. I went straight to the monitor wall. Lane 3 showed the sedan continue past the canopy, past the point where vehicles usually left frame, and keep going on screen along a strip of road the camera did not physically cover, 40 yards farther than the real lens should have seen. Then the feed cut to static for 1 second. When the image returned, the lane was empty, and my name had appeared in the note field of the active log entry where the destination code should have been. I stared at the monitor long enough for Garza to ask what I was looking at, and by the time I pointed to the log field, my name was gone. The destination code had returned in its place, plain alphanumeric, nothing unusual about it. If I had been alone, I might have convinced myself I was tired and keyed up and seeing patterns where there were none. But the rest of the line was still wrong. Same plate as the earlier sedan, same lane, same hour, no second stop, no exit timestamp yet. Garza leaned in, read the entry, then checked the manual log where I had written the first pass by hand. He did not say I was mistaken. He only said that once a repeated vehicle cleared, I should avoid playback for 5 minutes unless the lane physically blocked. I asked why. He said some footage was worse close together. That answer made no sense in any official way. It made perfect sense in the one we were actually working under. The checkpoint quieted after that, in the strained way a room quiets after someone says the wrong thing out loud. Traffic still came through, but thinner now, mostly trucks and tired drivers with the distant look people get after too many dark miles. I kept my voice level and my questions short. Every time I finished a stop, I checked the lane monitors before looking at anything else. Lane 3 stayed empty for almost 40 minutes, and the emptiness itself started feeling like part of the pattern. The pause a system takes before repeating itself. I used the gap to study the old handwritten notes tucked into the back of the manual binder. Most were practical. Camera lag on windy nights. Printer out of toner. Secondary gate sticks in dry weather. Then I found the first note that sounded like it belonged to the same world as the rule sheet. If duplicate traffic clears on first release, do not search for destination. Searching extends contact. No signature, no date, just a rule that had clearly cost someone enough to write down. At 12:47 a.m., the dark SUV arrived for the first time. I saw the cracked upper corner of the windshield on the monitor before I saw the body shape in the lane. Then the real vehicle rolled under the canopy 2 seconds later, exactly in sync with the pattern I was already learning to hate. Dust up the doors, no front plate, rear glass dark enough to swallow the floodlight. The plate reader flashed partial characters on the rear tag, then dropped them. I stayed back until the headlights fully stopped and stepped to the driver window. This time it was a man, mid-30s maybe, work jacket zipped to the throat, baseball cap low, both hands resting calmly at the wheel. He looked at me when I approached, which by then actually made me less comfortable than the ones who refused. I asked citizenship. He answered, "Yes, sir." I asked where he was headed. Midland. His voice was normal. His face was normal. The stop should have stayed normal. Then I glanced at the thermal monitor on the stand beside the lane and saw no heat at all in the rear compartment, only the driver and engine block glowing. That brought Rule 4 back into my head so sharply I could almost see the typed line. If thermal shows no heat in the rear compartment, wait 40 seconds before opening the back door. If you hear knocking before the 40 seconds are up, do not open it. I told the driver to hold where he was and stepped back from the SUV, keeping the thermal screen in view. The back remained cold and blank. No passenger shapes, no animal, no retained cabin warmth. Nothing but a dead gray rectangle where the rear seats should have been. I started counting in my head, slow and exact. At 12 seconds, nothing. At 20, still nothing. At 27, a sound came from inside the back. 3 soft knocks, evenly spaced, not loud enough to be forceful, not hesitant enough to be random. My whole body wanted to move toward the rear hatch. Instead, I kept counting. 31, 32, 33. The driver stayed still, eyes forward, both hands on the wheel, as if the knocking behind him had not happened. At 40 seconds, I walked to the rear of the SUV and opened the back door. The cargo area was empty except for a dust-filmed floor mat, a folded blanket, and a child car seat strapped into the third row on the passenger side. No passenger, no smuggled body, no animal, nothing that explained the thermal void or the knocking. What unsettled me was not just the emptiness, it was the order of it. The child seat was buckled in cleanly, angled straight, cup holder snapped into place, as if it had been set up for a trip that had either not started yet or had ended somewhere nobody had documented. I checked behind the folded blanket and under the floor panel anyway, because training leaves habits in your hands long after it leaves them in your mind. Nothing. When I shut the rear door, the sound echoed harder than it should have under the canopy. The driver asked very calmly if he could go now. I said yes and stepped away. He drove north into the dark at the same steady speed all the others used. I logged the SUV by hand as soon as it cleared, because by then I trusted the manual pages more than the software. Partial rear tag, cracked windshield corner, child seat in the back, no rear thermal, knocking before inspection, rear compartment clear after 40 seconds. Garza read the note over my shoulder without comment and initialed the margin, which was the first time I had seen him put his own mark beside one of these events. I asked whether he had seen the knocking pattern before. He said yes. I asked whether it ever lined up with an actual passenger. he said not once. Then he added that opening too early made things worse. I asked what worse meant. He kept his eyes on the log and said it meant sometimes the checkpoint got more than one version of the same vehicle afterward. That sentence stayed with me for the next 30 minutes while ordinary traffic passed through, because it implied duplication, the way mechanics talk about stress fractures. Not mystery, not folklore, just a repeating failure mode people had learned to phrase quietly. The SUV returned at 1:31 a.m. I knew it before the tag reader failed again. Same body shape, same cracked windshield corner, same road dust along the lower doors. It appeared first on the lane 3 monitor, then in real space, just like before. The time between passes was short enough to make my neck tighten, even before I looked at the manual rule sheet clipped beside the desk. If the same vehicle is logged twice within 1 hour, do not stop it a second time. Lower the barrier and let it pass. My old instincts pushed hard the other way. Repeated vehicle with a suspicious rear setup and a failed plate read is exactly the kind of thing any sane checkpoint would pull secondary, maybe hold, maybe search, top to bottom. But the whole structure of the site had been teaching me one point over and over. What worked in official logic did not always work here. I put my hand on the control and waited. The SUV rolled up slower this time, and as it reached the stop line, the thermal screen flickered long enough to show a small seated heat shape in the child seat. The flicker lasted maybe half a second, long enough to see, not long enough to trust. A small warm outline where the child seat sat, head shape tilted slightly toward the window. Then the screen flattened again to the same dead gray absence I had seen before. I felt the old traffic stop part of my mind, rise fast and ugly at the sight of it. That surge of urgency built from fear and imagined timing, the exact thing that had destroyed my life the first time. The rule was still there. Same vehicle within 1 hour. Do not stop it again. I lowered the barrier. The driver did not look at me this time. He kept his face forward while the SUV rolled past. As the rear window crossed the light, I glanced in and saw only black tint and my own pale reflection. Then from the back seat area, soft and close through the closed glass, came 3 knocks, the same rhythm as before. When the SUV cleared the canopy, lane 3 on the monitor remained occupied for 2 full seconds after the real road had emptied. I went straight to the playback, despite what Garza had told me earlier, because by then fear had started dressing itself as documentation in my head. The first pass of the SUV looked mostly as I remembered it. Driver visible, rear hatch inspection, child seat in back, no obvious passenger. The second pass was different in a way that made my stomach go hollow. The windshield glare hid most of the driver's face this time, but the rear side window caught just enough interior light to show a small figure in the child seat, head turned toward the lane, one hand raised at shoulder height as if resting against the glass. Not a thermal artifact, not a trick of the empty seat shape. A passenger, small enough to be a child. I paused the frame and leaned in. The hand looked too still, the way hands look in funeral photos when people have been told to hold the pose. Garza came over, saw the frozen image, and shut off the monitor without a word. Then he told me in a level voice that playback after duplicate contact was how people started asking the wrong questions out loud. I asked him what wrong questions meant, and for the first time his patience showed a crack. He said it meant questions that turn procedure into invitation. I told him that was not an explanation. He said no, but it was the useful part. Then he opened the lower drawer of the camera desk, took out a packet of older handwritten incident notes folded into a rubber band, and dropped them beside the manual log. "Read those," he said, "but do it before dawn, and do not take them off site." I sat down and worked through them while the lanes stayed quiet. Some were only fragments. Duplicate truck, no second stop. Monitor cleared at 2:03. Rear thermal mismatch, knocking at 21 seconds. No visual passenger after wait. Then a line from 9 years earlier, written in heavier hand than the rest. Repeated family, SUV. Juvenile in rear, on second pass only. Officer engaged verbally. Lane stayed active until sunrise. I read that sentence 3 times. Then I looked up at the dark monitor screen and understood the checkpoint was not just seeing the same traffic twice. Sometimes it was completing the vehicle on the second pass. By the time the sky began paling over the desert, I had read the incident notes twice and trusted sleep less than I trusted the lane cameras. Garza took the packet back without asking what I thought of it. Men like him do not ask for reactions when they already know the options. I drove to the motel with the image of that small raised hand fixed in my head, not because it had been dramatic, but because it had been so controlled. Everything at the checkpoint was controlled. The voices, the timing, the spacing of the knocks, the way the software held an encounter open as if waiting for someone to say the next required thing. I slept in pieces and woke before noon with the same conclusion I had resisted all night. The checkpoint was not haunted in the lazy way people use the word. It was procedural. It wanted stops completed. It wanted vehicles recognized, routed, opened, and spoken to in the right order. And once it picked the right shape, it learned how to make it personal. That night, the desert wind had dropped, and the stillness around the checkpoint made the floodlights feel harsher than before. Garza was in the trailer filling out a maintenance form when I came in. I asked him straight whether the site used whatever mattered most to the person working it. He kept writing a few seconds longer, then said, "Not at first, not unless you stayed long enough." I asked what long enough meant. He said for some men it was 3 nights, for others 3 weeks. Then he finally looked up and asked whether I had ever worked a fatal traffic stop involving a juvenile passenger. I did not answer right away. He nodded once, like that was answer enough. Then he told me the checkpoint did not invent people out of nothing. It found unfinished parts and routed them through whatever procedure was still available. That sentence sat in me the rest of the walk to the lane. Not invent, root. Even the horror here sounded like policy language. The first half of the shift stayed clean. Ranch truck, utility van, 2 women heading north with shopping bags piled in back, 1 box truck full of restaurant supplies. Enough normal traffic to make me start wondering whether the site had spent itself the night before. Then, at 12:41 a.m., Lane 3 lit up with a vehicle that did not belong to the checkpoint at all. White County Patrol unit on the monitor, light bar dark, old push bumper, black door seal. Same department crest I had worn on my shoulder in New Mexico, my own old county. I stood so still, Garza noticed before I spoke. He looked at the feed, then at me, and said, "Do not approach until the vehicle stops." It felt absurd hearing that applied to a patrol unit, but absurd had stopped meaning much out there. 2 seconds later, The real headlights appeared on the road, and the vehicle rolled under the canopy. Same shape, same package, same roof rack. Unit number half, visible in the glare. Not mine. Close enough to my old district to make my throat tighten anyway. The driver was in uniform, tan shirt, campaign hat on the passenger seat, both hands on the wheel. I could not see his face clearly because the floodlight hit the windshield at the wrong angle and turned it into a pale wash over the upper half of him. I did not ask anything right away. That was partly caution, partly the old instinct that cops should not work each other harder than necessary at night. Then the second rule came back to me, and I realized he had not looked at me once. Both hands on the wheel, eyes ahead, one question only. I asked where he was headed. He answered in the same clipped tone I had heard on real stops 100 times. Your report was wrong. For a second, the whole lane seemed to lose depth. The concrete, the barrier, the trailer window behind me, all of it flattening the way your vision does when blood moves too fast in the wrong direction. I stepped back and sent the patrol unit to secondary without saying another word. The bay was empty when I got there. No unit, no engine note fading off, no reflected headlights on the fence. The same pattern as before, only sharper now because it had chosen a form built out of my own memory. I checked the gate. Closed. I checked the gravel access road beyond the chain link. Empty. Garza arrived without hurrying and stood beside me long enough to make the emptiness official. Then he asked exactly what the driver had said. I told him. He nodded once and said not to repeat the phrase back inside the trailer. I asked why not. He said because names and statements tended to cling to the software. That was one of those sentences that should have sounded insane and did not. Not there. Back in the camera room, the system had already logged secondary routing with no arrival timestamp. Open encounter again. I watched the event line sit there active on the monitor, while the bay outside stayed blank and still. Then I checked the camera replay and saw the patrol unit had no readable driver face at all, just the uniform shirt and a bright pale void where features should have been. I used the quiet stretch after that to go through older notes again, this time looking for anything tied to recognition, confession, or law enforcement imagery. The farther back the pages went, the more careful the phrasing became. Recognition, prompt successful, no follow-up. Mirror passenger, visible on second contact only. Subject heard non-present radio traffic after duplicate release. Then one page clipped from a later packet, probably written by someone who had stopped pretending this could be summarized cleanly. The checkpoint uses completion language. It prefers stops with unfinished authority. It will offer you your worst clean mistake and wait for procedure to do the rest. I put that page down and looked through the trailer window toward lane 3. The floodlights made the pavement gleam in flat white bands. Nothing moving, nothing there. Still, I had the uneasy certainty that the checkpoint had already adjusted to me and would keep adjusting as long as I kept showing up and wearing a vest under its lights. At 1:26 a.m., a dark sedan rolled in with 2 front seat occupants and what looked like a teenage boy in the rear passenger side when I first glanced through the window. Driver was a woman, passenger an older man. Both answered cleanly. Both looked tired and real in the ordinary way people do after too many highway miles. While the driver handed over her documents, I checked the rear again and saw the boy more clearly in the side mirror of the trailer behind me than I did through the actual glass. Thin face, dark hair, shoulder against the seatbelt, looking out the window with the stillness of somebody pretending to sleep. When I turned and looked directly into the car, the rear seat was empty, not hidden, empty. No bag, no blanket, no second shape folded low. I finished the stop without letting my voice change and waved them through. Then I stood there another second after the sedan was gone, staring at the lane and trying to decide whether the mirror had shown me memory, possibility, or just a version of the stop the checkpoint preferred more than the one I had actually had. Garza saw enough of my face when I came back inside to know something had happened. I told him what I had seen in the trailer mirror. He asked whether I had looked directly into the car before or after checking the reflection. I said after. He muttered something under his breath that sounded more tired than surprised, and wrote a short note in the manual log. Mirror passenger on first contact only. No direct visual confirmation. Then he told me one thing nobody had put on the typed rule sheet. Do not use reflections to make a stop more complete than it is. I asked if that was really how he thought about it. He said that was how the checkpoint thought about it, which by then had become more important. Then he added that convex mirrors, side glass, and camera replay tended to be where the extra details showed up first, not because they were more truthful, because they were easier to persuade. I did not ask what exactly was doing the persuading. We were well past the point where better wording would have made any of it easier to hear. The next hit came through the radio instead of the lane. At 1:58 a.m., while I was updating the handwritten log, static washed over the trailer speakers, and an old unit call sign from my county department came through clear as day. Not one I had used often, but one I knew immediately. Then a male dispatcher voice said, "Subject in rear seat. Confirm status." Every muscle in my back locked at once. No one else in the room reacted like they recognized the words themselves, but Garza moved fast enough to kill the audio feed before the line could repeat. He looked at me and said, "Do not answer any question that sounds like a report." I asked if other people got that too. He said everybody got their own version, sooner or later. The checkpoint liked formats that already lived in your hands. That line hit hard because it was true. Reports, stops, checklists, inspections, all of it was really the same habit. A system asks what happened. You give it language. The language gives it shape. After that, everybody has to live inside what was said. At 2:37 a.m., Lane 3 showed the dark SUV again. Same cracked windshield corner, same failed front plate red, same dust line along the rocker panels. This time, I felt a genuine shot of dread before it even reached the barrier, because I knew what the sight was doing now. It was not just replaying patterns, it was narrowing them. The SUV stopped under the floodlights, and the thermal screen beside the lane lit up with the driver, engine block, and for one brief second, two rear heat shapes, one adult-sized, one small. Then the rear compartment flattened to gray again. I stayed where I was and let the rule settle over the moment before I moved. If thermal shows no heat signature in the rear compartment, wait 40 seconds before opening the back door. At 15 seconds, one soft knock came from inside. At 22, another. At 30, I saw movement in the rear side glass, a small face turning toward me From inside the darkness, where thermal insisted there was nothing at all. When the count reached 40, and I opened the back, the only thing there was the child seat and a folded county incident form with my old department header on it. I stood there with the incident form in my hand longer than I should have. The rear hatch open behind me, and the cold lane light flattening everything into paper colors. The header was real enough to make my stomach turn. Same county seal, same report layout, same box structure for occupants, contact sequence, and use of force. The blank fields below it were clean except for one line already filled in under narrative continuation. Subject not fully processed. I shut the hatch, walked the form back to the trailer, and laid it on the desk without speaking. Garza read the header first, then the line beneath it, and his face did something I had not seen before. Not fear, exactly. More like recognition mixed with fatigue. He said secondary was the trap point on this site, not because vehicles were physically there, but because once a stop got routed into a formal follow-up, the checkpoint started trying to complete it in its own language. That was the first time he said it plain enough to matter. He pulled a thin packet from the lower drawer and told me to read only the marked pages. Most of it was incident summaries from years apart, typed over, recopied, and stripped of names, the kind of paperwork people make when the original version has become too dangerous to keep around. One sentence repeated in different forms across several pages. Avoid unnecessary completion language during unresolved night events. Another said, secondary encounters may persist in system logic after physical absence. The last marked page hit hardest. Incomplete stop patterns increase when personnel carry prior unresolved contact trauma. I read that line twice and hated how clinical it made my life sound. Garza said the checkpoint did not care about justice, guilt, or memory in any human sense. It cared about completion. Identity checked, occupants counted, rear compartment opened, route confirmed, stop closed. If something had once failed to close cleanly, the site kept trying to finish it through whoever happened to be standing there now. That explanation, limited as it was, pulled the whole story into focus. The repeated vehicles were not random hauntings. The lane cameras were not just seeing impossible traffic. The checkpoint was processing encounters that should have ended somewhere else, somewhere earlier, maybe years earlier, and dragging them back through whatever system still knew how to inspect, route, and document movement. That was why the rules worked. They were less like protections against attack and more like ways of refusing participation. Do not ask the second question. Do not open the rear too early. Do not stop the duplicate vehicle twice. Do not finish the stop in the tone the system wants. Once I saw it that way, the fear changed shape. It became more practical, which in some ways is worse. Practical fear asks what step matters next. I looked at the blank incident form again and realized the site had not put it in the SUV to frighten me. It had put it there to invite me to fill it out. The checkpoint went quiet for almost half an hour after that. Quiet enough that the trailer lights and radio hiss took on too much definition. I used the time to make my own notes in the back of the manual log. No second question after recognition, no completion language, no playback after duplicate contact. Do not read found paperwork out loud. It felt a little ridiculous writing private survival rules inside a government checkpoint, but I had trusted written procedure more than instinct ever since my old life ended, and I was not about to stop now. At 1:11 a.m., the camera feed over secondary flickered once and returned. The bay sat empty in the live image, chain link behind it, inspection table against the wall. Then a vehicle outline shimmered in and out for half a second, not fully formed, just the pale reflection of a windshield and roofline where nothing physical stood. The software generated a secondary active box with no source lane attached. Garza saw it too and said very quietly, "Do not go out there." I stayed inside, but I watched. The active box on the monitor remained open without any arrival timestamp, as if the system had skipped directly to an inspection state. Then text began populating one field at a time without keyboard input. Occupants pending, rear compartment pending, route unresolved. The words appeared in the same dry administrative font as everything else on the screen. That bothered me more than if they had arrived as some cinematic glitch. Bureaucratic language is harder to fight because your mind already knows how to obey it. Garza reached over, printed the live event screen on the office laser printer, and handed me the page while the ink was still warm. "If the software is going to write," he said, "make it speak onto paper too." That line told me how long he had been living with this place. Men only get that practical after years of losing arguments to things they cannot explain. I read the printout. Under subject identification, where no data should have existed, was the first name of the dead teenager from my stop. The room went small around that page. I could hear the HVAC, the printer cooling down, traffic far off on the highway, all of it suddenly too separate and too clear. Garza asked if the name was right. I told him yes. He nodded once and did not ask anything else, which I was grateful for. Some truths should not be spoken more than necessary under floodlights. Lane 3 camera lit up again before either of us moved. The dark SUV was returning. This time the monitor showed it first, then the road. Same cracked windshield corner, same failed plate read, same measured roll into the stop line. I checked the thermal display before I even stepped forward. Driver hot, engine hot, rear compartment gray, then not gray. A small seated shape flickered warm in the child seat. Beside it, for less than a second, another shape leaned forward from the third row, like someone trying to see around the front seat. Then both vanished back into flat cold. My hands felt steady. That was how I knew the fear had crossed over into something more dangerous. Decision. I approached the driver window, and the man behind the wheel looked directly at me for the first time. No cap this time. Same age range, same plain face, but clearer than before, as if the sight had decided we were past the part where it needed to hide behind glare. I asked citizenship because procedure still matters, even when horror starts dressing itself like work. He said, "Yes, sir." I did not ask anything else. Before I could step back, he spoke again in a voice so calm it took effort not to hear obedience in it. He said the teenager's name, just the name, nothing more. Not accusing, not emotional, not theatrical. The same way a driver gives a town name when asked for destination. It hit me harder than if he had shouted. Behind him, from inside the cold rear compartment, came 3 soft knocks. I felt every old instinct in me rise at once. Open the back, clarify the stop, resolve the uncertainty. That was exactly what the checkpoint wanted. I stepped back instead and kept my mouth closed. The driver waited a second longer, then repeated the name. Garza was beside me before I realized he had left the trailer. He did not speak to the driver. He only said to me, low and level, one question only, one stop only. Then he stepped back again, not interfering, just making the rule audible in the air. I lowered the barrier and waved the SUV through without asking a second thing. The driver watched me as he rolled forward, his face unreadable now that I had denied the line the response it wanted. The rear side glass passed through the floodlight, and for one instant I saw the outline of a young face in the child seat, cheek turned toward the window, eyes open. Then the SUV was through and moving north into the dark. On the monitor, Lane 3 stayed occupied. Not 2 seconds this time. Longer. The software kept the active encounter open, while the physical road outside lay empty and still. Under notes, a new line populated by itself. Secondary, recommended. Incomplete juvenile identification. Garza reached past me and cut power to the lane terminal. The screen went black. That should have ended the event. Instead, the radio came alive with an old county dispatcher tone, followed by the same clipped voice as before. Confirm rear passenger status. The call was not coming through the public channel. It was riding the local speaker line inside the trailer, as if the building itself had decided to route it through the nearest official sounding path. I shut my eyes once and said nothing. Garza killed the speaker, but not before the voice repeated the instruction in a different form. Confirm if conscious. That was when I understood something else important. The checkpoint did not only want recognition, it wanted me to resume the old stop at the exact point where my life had broken, and do it this time under procedure. That made the trap almost elegant in the ugliest possible way. It was offering me the fantasy of correction. One more chance, one cleaner report, one proper count. The dead are persuasive when they speak in the grammar of regret. I wrote that sentence down before I could forget it. At 2:32 a.m., every lane monitor desynced at once. Lane 1 showed a semi still under the canopy that had already cleared in real space. Lane 2 remained empty on screen, while an actual pickup rolled through. Lane 3 displayed the dark SUV again before any headlights appeared, then held the image there without advancing. The checkpoint had moved past isolated anomalies. It was widening the event across the whole site. Garza checked the control board, then looked at me and said this was as close as the place got to a push. I asked what stopped it. He said, refusing to complete what it put in front of you. Then the Lane 3 feed updated and showed the inside of the SUV more clearly than it ever had before. Driver at the wheel, child seat in back, a teenage passenger beside it, turned toward the camera, face pale and still. The features were not perfect, but they were close enough. The software tagged the stop as pending occupant verification. My mouth went dry. The checkpoint had finally built the exact encounter it thought I would not walk away from. For a few seconds, I could not tell whether the thing tightening in my chest was fear or relief. That is the ugliest truth in the whole story. Part of me wanted the impossible stop in front of me, because impossible stops carry impossible hopes. If the checkpoint could bring the dead that close to procedure, some stupid wounded part of the mind wants to believe procedure might also bring them back out to the other side. Garza must have seen enough of that thought on my face to understand the danger. He said the site was trying to turn remorse into compliance. Then he handed me the unofficial rule sheet again, the same page from my first night, now creased and soft at the corners from years of handling. One stop only, one question only, no second contact on duplicate traffic. Wait out the false urgency, let it pass. He tapped the last one with a thick finger. Some rules sound like cowardice until you realize they are really refusals. That line did more for me than comfort would have. I stepped outside because staying in the trailer with the monitor image would have been worse. The desert air felt dry enough to cut. The floodlights over the lanes hummed softly. Beyond the checkpoint was open West Texas darkness, brush and highway, and low distance stretching north into places with names and gas stations, and sleeping people who had no idea what passed under those lights after midnight. Lane 3 remained physically empty, while the monitor inside still held the SUV in frame. That mismatch mattered. It meant the site had not finished crossing its own wires yet. It still needed a real stop to anchor the false one. I stood by the barrier with my radio clipped high and both hands visible in front of me, the same way I had taught nervous drivers to keep theirs. Then the real headlights appeared on the road and rolled toward the stop line in perfect alignment with the image that had been waiting for them. Same SUV, same cracked windshield, same steady approach, no engine urgency at all. When it stopped under the canopy, the lane felt unnaturally quiet. No insect noise, no clink from the barriers, no distant truck rumble from the highway behind us. Just the low idle of the SUV and the soft electrical buzz overhead. I walked up to the driver window and kept my breathing even. The driver looked directly at me right away. The face was plain enough to become more unsettling the longer I looked, the kind of face built from normal details arranged with too little randomness. I asked citizenship. He answered, "Yes, sir." I did not ask destination, route, purpose, or anything else my old training wanted. Behind him, the rear compartment gave one soft knock, then another, then a third. The thermal display on the stand beside the lane showed the driver hot, the engine block bright, and a small rear passenger shape seated where the child seat sat, impossible and clear. The system was offering me evidence from every angle at once. Sound, image, thermal, memory, a complete stop. I stepped back from the window instead of leaning in. The driver spoke before I could move farther. He said the teenager's name again, calm, flat, almost helpful. Then he added a sentence I had not let myself hear in waking life for more than a year. "You never checked the back." That line nearly broke me because it was true in every way that mattered. On the real stop in New Mexico, the rear passenger had become part of the scene too late in my mind. In the aftermath, every report, every hearing, every private replay of the moment led back to the same blank place. What did I miss before it went wrong? The checkpoint knew that, or whatever lived in it knew that. It was offering not just accusation, but sequence. Open the rear, count the occupants, finish the stop correctly this time. My hand twitched once toward the back of the SUV, and I stopped it there in midair. Then I lowered the barrier and waved the vehicle through. The driver watched me with a look that was not anger and not approval, just recognition that the door had closed again. The SUV rolled past slowly enough for me to see into the rear side glass. A teenage face sat in the dark beside the child seat, clearer than before, cheek pale in the floodlight. Eyes open, no fear in them at all. That was the detail that mattered. No plea, no accusation, no desperation, only stillness, as if the checkpoint had assembled exactly what it thought would hold me in place. Then the vehicle cleared the lane and moved north. On the physical road, it vanished into darkness within seconds. On the monitor inside the trailer, it remained under the canopy, idling in perfect frame, active encounter still open. Garza did not touch the keyboard this time. He only said, "Wait." So I waited with him, both of us standing in the stale trailer air, while the software kept the stop alive without us. Under pending action, the line read, "Occupant verification required." Under route, it read secondary. Under notes, it read unresolved juvenile. Then, without input from either of us, the active field flickered. The screen held on the SUV for another 5 seconds that felt longer than most arguments. Then, the image changed in small pieces. First, the rear passenger shape faded from the thermal pane. Then the note field cleared. Then the recommendation for secondary vanished. The driver remained at the wheel on camera, hands high, face forward. For a breath, I thought the site was simply resetting for another attempt. Instead, the active encounter box disappeared entirely. Lane 3 showed only empty pavement under floodlight glare. Not delayed empty, clean empty. The exit timestamp posted a second later. The checkpoint had finally closed an event without being fed the words or actions it wanted from me. That realization hit with more exhaustion than triumph. Some victories just prove how long you were being worked before the mechanism failed. Garza let out a breath through his nose and said that was the first clean release he had seen in years. I asked if it was over. He said not for the place, maybe for the stop. The rest of the shift stayed quiet in a way that felt less like peace than aftermath. Normal traffic resumed, and for the first time since I had arrived, the normality did not feel staged. A pickup with feed sacks, a long-haul driver rubbing his eyes at the wheel, a family SUV with blankets piled in the back, and 2 little girls asleep against each other. I let the ordinary stops be ordinary, and did not go looking for extra details in mirrors, side glass, or monitor playback. When dawn started lifting the horizon from black to gray, Garza collected the handwritten notes, clipped them together, and locked them back in the desk drawer. He said the checkpoint would keep processing what it could, but some unresolved lines lost strength if nobody volunteered to finish them. I asked him why he had stayed so many years. He looked out through the trailer window toward Lane 3 and said some men stay because they think they can fix a place. Others stay because they know what happens when nobody is there to refuse it. I turned in my radio and quit before noon. I drove north out of West Texas with the first full daylight I had seen after a shift there. Scrub country flattening out on both sides of the highway, and the checkpoint shrinking in the rear view until it looked like any other government structure trying to hold shape against distance. My duffel sat on the passenger seat. The unofficial rule sheet was folded into the front pocket of it. Though I had told myself twice already I planned to throw it away. I did not. Some papers stop being documents and become tools even after the job attached to them is done. By the time I crossed into New Mexico, the worst part of my exhaustion had started to feel like release. Not forgiveness, nothing that generous, just a loosening around the one wound the checkpoint had kept pressing. It had offered me correction, and I had refused the trap hidden inside it. That mattered. Maybe not enough to save a life already ended, but enough to keep me from building my whole future around the fantasy of reopening the stop. For the next few weeks, I worked odd mechanical jobs and kept my life small. Tire shop in Las Cruces, 2 days helping a cousin with HVAC installs, 1 late-night brake repair at a machine yard outside Deming. I slept better than I had in over a year. That alone should have warned me not to trust the calm too quickly. Bad systems do not always follow you in the dramatic ways stories promise. Sometimes they wait for you to rebuild routine, because routine is where procedure lives. One evening, I stopped at a roadside gas station off Interstate 10, the kind with a bright canopy, a soda fountain inside, and security cameras watching every angle. Nobody important was actually monitoring. I was paying at the counter when I glanced up at the convex mirror bolted near the ceiling over the back aisle. In the warped reflection of the forecourt outside, pump number 3 held a dark SUV with a cracked upper windshield corner. No front plate. Child seat in back. I turned at once and looked through the actual window. Pump 3 was empty. I did not go outside. That is the part of the ending some people might judge, if they have never had a system learn the shape of their weakest thought. I stood where I was with a bottle of water in one hand and the cold glass door cooler humming behind me. In the convex mirror, the SUV sat angled under the canopy lights, exactly the way it had under lane 3. Through the dark rear side glass, I could just make out the pale shape of a face turned toward the store, not pressing close, not asking, waiting. The old instinct to step out and verify rose in me once and passed. I set the water on the counter, kept both hands where I could see them in the mirror, and said nothing. When I looked up again, the reflection had changed. Pump 3 showed only concrete and a trash can and a strip of yellow curb under hard white light. Outside the real window, the forecourt stayed empty. I left the store without looking back a second time. Since then, I do one thing every time I stop for gas at night. I check the mirrors first, and if they show me a vehicle the lot does not have, I do not try to complete the picture.